Yeah.
All right, everybody. We are actually going to do things slightly out of order. And we're going to sit down and have a little conversation really quick before we move into the normal podcast. And I'll run the intro like we usually do. We're placing this at the beginning because as I'm preparing for the podcast today, and I'm looking at trending information on what we're talking about and what to address that's going on. We've had drama in the world. And I felt it probably necessary to sit down and have a little chat. Now, this podcast is not political. Not political in the sense that we don't care about political parties, and we're not here to tout one thing or another. We're not really here to talk about the elections. So I like to consider us a bastion separate from the drama that's going on across the world and nationally. Since we're in America, but you should be able to enjoy us if you're outside the country. Oh my gosh, what event am I talking about? Somebody attempted to assassinate Donald Trump today, not that long ago, like minutes. Well, probably like an hour or so. And it's been a big deal on the internet, and I realize no one's going to talk about anything that's trending or otherwise if it doesn't have to do with Donald Trump and what happened not that long ago. Yes, he was shot. Yes, he was shot in his ear. Now, why am I bringing this up in this nerd podcast? Well, this opens up to sort of a greater discussion when it comes to civility, when it comes to dialogue. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of people who, in the normal course of political discourse, come out and talk about how much they don't like Trump and how awful he is. And a lot of the rhetoric has been extreme and exciting when it comes to the current political discourse in this country. And, you know, with all the drama happening around the world. Let's go at least slightly far back, since this podcast is generally going to be about discourse between people who don't disagree, and the toxic fans and the drama going on in media and video games and shows and whatnot. The original creators of this country created something called the First Amendment, and then the reason why the First Amendment exists, the Freedom of Speech Amendment. Now, a lot of people misinterpret it as specifically, I want to be able to say whatever I want to without consequence, which
any repercussions, yeah,
without any repercussions. Now, that's not technically what the First Amendment's goal is. That's not technically what it's for. It was originally written to encourage discourse without punishment. So it was deliberately intended to encourage people to disagree and interact with one another and have back and forth without state punishment.
Especially disagree with the government. Yeah, that's the thing. It was especially for that part that the general public could exercise this discourse without fearing that the government would come down on them.
Now,
because this was the first place that enshrined that as law.
The only place. This is the only country that enshrines it at law. It doesn't exist in Great Britain. It doesn't exist in France or Germany. You can be done in for things like hate speech and whatnot. That doesn't exist here. And I am a massive First Amendment advocate. If we can't find ways to have reasonable discourse in what is essentially a democracy, not direct democracy, but we're not going to get into that.
Right.
Then we can't talk at all. There's no cooperation. There's no reasonability. And the reason why I'm having this discussion is not directly because I'm trying to address the events that recently happened. It's because if you're going over the things that's trending right now, the number one trending thing on Twitter, the number one trending thing across the internet is hashtag Civil War.
Oh my gosh.
Things like this that occur is going to inflame that sort of attitude. And my goal here, at least in this short discussion before we go into the normal nerdy broadcasting that you so enjoy, is that when we stop interacting, when we stop talking to each other, and when we exaggerate people we disagree with into demons and villains and turn them into, because it's easy to demonize somebody when you don't interact with them and their ideas on a regular basis. All you do is hear the extreme, exaggerated, straw man explanations for people that you hear from when you sit in your bubble. And when we don't interact with each other is when things like violence happen. And violence should never be the goal. I have a quote from Isaac Asimov at the end of this podcast, which addresses that. So, because me and hopefully Ross recently have been going over sort of people talking about who disagree with us perhaps on things like The Acolyte and Star Wars and Rings of Power, and using extreme rhetoric like calling people that don't like a show animals and degenerates and racists and bigots and all sorts of isms that you could possibly think of because they dislike something you like. And we so internalize the things that we appreciate and we love because we self-identify with the things that we consume in our entertainment. And we should be better. And I could hear the argument now. Well, the other side are the most extreme possible friends of Adolphus, early members of a political party in the 1930s in Germany. And that why should I have reasonable discussion with them? They are the worst people ever. And it's like, you think they're the worst people ever because you've never interacted with them. And that goes with the opposite side of the spectrum. Reasonable discourse, reasonable disagreement, especially in the nerdy space, should be lauded and should be important. But the problem is people identify everything as political. People view everything through a political lens. And much as we talked about last week, everything is involved in a culture war, and everything from movies to TV to video games to all sorts of nerdy content out there is a battleground for the new ideology that's emergent. We can all do better. You can all do better. And when we stop talking to each other is when we're in these situations. I mean, needless to say, renounce violence, but renounce demonizing people simply because they don't like something you like. Perhaps. Anything to add before we run into our regular scheduled programming?
Just that I agree with you. Because nerddom especially has always been big on that. I mean, there's the classic Star Wars, Star Trek, Kirk, Picard, and up until very recently, within the last decade, I guess, it wasn't like this. Where, I don't know, like there's always been disagreements in this kind of space, but it's like it's taken a very strange tone, I think, within the last 10 years. That while entertaining as someone who doesn't care about the majority of these franchises, who only enjoyed them either when I was younger or like very peripherally, it would be a major bummer if I actually was super into them, because it makes it like intolerable. So yeah, don't do that.
That reminds me of Rich Evans talking about Star Trek, and he goes, "I now know how the Star Wars people feel," because he doesn't care about Star Wars. But now that they've ruined Star Trek, he's like, "Oh no, they've ruined the thing I love."
Everything's lame and stupid.
We should be able to say, "I hate the current disc. I hate this show," and it's fine. You should be able to say, "I hate new Star Wars," and it's okay. And not turn it into a political drama on a perpetual basis. JC, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm just really ashamed of the fans that call for people to off themselves or anything of that nature. That just doesn't get your point across. For one, I mean, go off yourself. I mean, no, that we should be above that. Yeah,
Sure.
they're doing things we don't like. Let's say that. We don't need to bring in the vitriol. If it so, the whole Rings of Power thing with the actress who plays Bronwyn not coming back the next season. If that's because of fans, that's deeply shaming to us, and we need to be better than that.
Agree, it can happen on both sides. And attacking people for simply being in a show is one thing. Attacking the show and it being a piece of garbage is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is the other thing that people don't always recognize because their feelings are so wrapped up in it is that it's not the actor's fault.
No.
The actor is doing their best to bring to life the vision of the writer and the director. So,
Well,
if
and
anything,
yeah.
they're the ones to blame, not the actors or actresses that were hired to portray the parts.
Yeah, I mean, especially like actors in these kind of shows, these are not big time actors that have a lot of power. They're just trying to make a living. Even if I don't agree with them, which I guarantee I don't, it's hard being an actor, man. They're just trying to make some money, and I imagine Disney paychecks are real nice. So, just whatever.
We spoke about an actor on Game of Thrones last week who was getting a lot of harassment on the internet, people angry with stuff his character did. And it's like,
what?
Well, he literally had to be like, that's my character. Like, I don't know what you want for my character's a bad guy.
Oh my God.
Well, and people obsess too much about these shows to the point where it's a part of their personality. And so when things happen in the shows, they've wrapped their personality around forms of entertainment and they don't know how to handle it. Silver, do you have anything to reflect on before we move along?
Not much. Just discuss problems, please. You don't have to go for the throat.
I
think
agree.
it's pretty obvious. Everyone should know that.
Well, they should, but they don't. Well, why do you think?
They don't, but yeah.
Well, why do you think things have gotten so bad? And it's because everything is inundated with politics. But I mean, now we're to the point where we've got national, international drama going on and violence, and it's like have we lacked the capacity to discuss things anymore, or at least cross the aisle with people we disagree with?
Apparently,
I refuse.
Yeah, I feel like people are getting bad at communicating, and that's a big problem.
Communication is important.
Yeah.
I'm going to step off my my box here, my soapbox. I suddenly lack the capacity to speak. It's a bad time at the moment.
No
for
good.
America.
Bad.
It's no good. Somebody did pass, and we can do a lot better. So
2 technically, but fuck one of them.
Yeah, okay. So let's pull up our socks, get ourselves together, because we've got a podcast to go into.
Bye.
Ah.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy!